Welcome to the Seed to Success podcast, where we deep dive into the strategies, stories, and smart decisions that help VAs and OBMs grow and thrive. I'm your host, Adrienne Donnelly, and whether you're just starting out or looking for ways to take your business to the next level, you're in the right place. Thank you to our episode sponsor, the VA Lead Network. If you're looking for high quality, vetted client opportunities, the VA Lead Network is where you need to be. You can preview available client opportunities on their website at valeadnetwork.com.au. And as a listener of the pod, you can enjoy 30% off your first month or year as a new member with the code Friends of Seed. That's all one word, all capitals, Friends of Seed. Now let's get into today's conversation. Welcome back to another episode. My name is Adrienne Donnelly and I am the host. Today I am very honored to be joined by one of our inner circle members, Giulia from Firefly Digital Support. Great to have you here, Giulia.
Hi, Adrienne. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. I want to jump straight in and understand from you how you became aware of the VA industry.
If I think back, it was around COVID time, and I think around COVID, everyone's eyes were opened about the possibility of being able to work from home full time. So I ended up doing some research and discovered all these VA groups, and the rest is history, as they say.
So what was your career or professional background before finding out about this industry and sort of pursuing it for yourself?
Previously, I had been in the corporate world for over 15 years. I worked in all areas of industries, pharmaceuticals, food retail, medical devices, and telco. So in those areas, I was support for retail teams, support for sales, so a lot of sales support. And then my last full-time gig was working in the industrial relations space. So it was a bit of a jump and a leap to go from that to the VA space. But I think I wouldn't have the work ethic I have now if I didn't work in the corporate space.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I think sometimes we see working for ourselves versus working for someone else is so different. And we often hear VAs talk about, well, I've never run a business, I've never worked for myself. But when you really break it down, whether it's skills or values and traits, there are so many transferable skills across.
Absolutely. I remember when I first started, I'm like, but I have no experience. And I had to keep reminding myself that I did actually have experience. I climbed the corporate ladder, starting from assistant all the way to a department head. So I definitely had experience, and I just needed to remind myself that I could back myself up with it. So I highly encourage people to stop thinking they don't have enough experience, because they do.
Yeah, and it is just that mindset shift, isn't it, around thinking about yourself as an employee versus a business owner, and almost reframing all of those things that you've done for 10, 15, 20 years when you were working for somebody else, or perhaps in another business that you ran, and wrapping them up into how you can market those through your new business.
That's, I think, probably the biggest hurdle is the mindset. I think imposter syndrome, everyone has been hit hard with it. I don't know anyone that hasn't encountered imposter syndrome in the VA space or online service provider space. You always have that niggling thought in the back of your mind about, am I doing it right? Do I know what I'm talking about? And you do. It's just that self-doubt creeping in.
Yes, absolutely. So what point was it that you decided to shift and start your own business and become a VA?
So after all the lockdowns and everything, I started doing some research into it properly, and I registered my ABN about 3 years ago under my old business name. And then I managed to pick up a little bit of admin work while still working. And then I ended up just going all in. In total, it's been about 3 years since I've been in business. Has it been easy the whole time? No. But it has been fun. It's been different. And I think the biggest thing that really got me through was community. Communities like the Inner Circle have made the biggest difference. Working at home or working in your own business can be so isolating and so lonely. I literally only have my dog to talk to, so I do talk to her. And so things like having a community where you can bounce ideas off, and Inner Circle is just, it made the biggest impact to my mindset and to my business.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Been in our industry for almost 10 years now. I agree. I was talking to another VA recently about that, about the importance of community, especially for those of us that do live on our own. And she had a really different perspective. She's got a really full household with lots of people in there. And she said that community is really important because while she's surrounded by a lot of people on a day-to-day basis, no one really gets it like other people in the industry do. So whilst her living situation is very different to say yours or mine, both living on our own, it was just as important for her because it was almost like, I need to just be around people who get it and not just like, oh, she's at her computer again, but actually people that really understand what you're going through and what our industry is all about.
100%. I used to try and get advice from family members or friends, and they would be like, oh, I don't know, I don't have my business, or I don't have a business in your industry. So even though, yeah, you still have the family and friends that you talk to, I talk to them about anything else but my business because they don't get it. And yeah, you need that community where you can bounce ideas off, whether they tell you you're crazy or not, or you just share memes and gifs. It just keeps that connection happening.
Yeah, and I think it's good to have people that are in your world, like the community, that are invested, but not almost as invested as family and friends. Because often our family and friends will tell us, they're one end of the spectrum. They're really skeptical or harsh or like, this is risky for you to do this. Or they're just like, you're amazing, we love you. And they're really uplifting, which is great. But almost sometimes that community can act as like a really, what's the word? Like they see it for what it is. They'll give you feedback, even though sometimes the feedback might be like, I think you're a bit off track here.
Yeah.
But then maybe they're not as invested, although they want really great things for you. They'll give you sometimes like the truths that we do need to hear and will challenge us and bring a different perspective, which I think is really helpful as well.
But that's what we want. For me, that's what I want. I want that if I'm on the wrong track, then I'd rather know than spend time doing something that is not going to benefit the business or leverage where I'm at currently. So I'm all for that constructive criticism. It absolutely helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great way to sort of segue into the next thing I want to ask you about. So 3 years in now, how different or similar does your business look like from when you started to what it is now?
1,000% different.
Really?
I started as general admin. It took me a while to find what I actually loved doing. I thought it was spreadsheets and documentation. So initially I started doing admin, documentation, creating bespoke spreadsheets for clients. And then I quickly realized it didn't light me up. It was not, I enjoyed it every now and then, but not full time. So I ended up pivoting after a client asked me if I knew anything about podcasts. So I threw myself into the world of podcasts and learning all about what happens in this space and how to be a support to anyone who wants to do a podcast or has one running and they're just doing it themselves. And it takes time. It takes a lot of time to work on a podcast. And I think people don't realize it initially and then they get overwhelmed really quickly. So I now look at it from a holistic point of view for my clients. and I love it. I get paid to listen to podcasts. I mean, couldn't think of a better job, for me anyway.
Yeah, and you are fantastic at it. For those that don't know, Giulia has been instrumental in getting the Seed to Success podcast back up and relaunched. As you would have heard in our last episode with Amy, our previous owner, we did take a break from the podcast for a while. And it's something that I really wanted to reinvigorate as the new owner of Seed, because I really see the value in sharing stories and experiences on this sort of platform in that podcast style. And this podcast would not be back up and running, honestly, Giulia, if it wasn't for you. You are exceptional at what you do. You are a wealth of knowledge, and just all the little things that you think of and tips and tricks and things, just keep this in mind. We could do this. Let's really get the most out of this podcast. You, I believe, have landed right where you should be, because you are exceptional at the whole podcast management and support area.
Thank you.
This whole conversation, it's one that you and I hear a lot in our industry around being more of what we would classify as a generalist VA, which is the camp that I fall into through Organised by Adrienne. I work across a broad range of industries, clients and services, and then the world of niching. How hard how did you find that landing on your niche? You mentioned previously, just before that, you thought you knew what it was and it was more generalist. When you were sort of going through that upskilling and training to become a VA, what was that process of landing on your niche like for you?
It was more, I leaned on what I knew I could do. I drew from my corporate experience. I knew that I worked as a reporting analyst in one of my roles, and so I knew how to do that. I knew how to look after inboxes and that kind of thing. So I think I maybe took the easy way out and just went, I'll do that. So I did that for about a year and a half. And then I fell into community management for a client. And to be honest, it wasn't for me. It didn't spark joy for me. And that's okay. You don't know until you try different areas. And I think for me, the advice if I could go back and give myself advice is, while it's good to have a niche, I wouldn't beat myself up about not having a niche. I think it takes time. If you don't know what you're passionate about, that's okay. It's totally okay. And just keep going and you will find something that brings you so much fun and joy to your work.
I think that is such beautiful advice, because we definitely see in our industry people coming through and that pressure to find the niche and to work out what lights them up and what their why is. But, you are a fantastic example of needing to, kiss a few frogs, so to speak, in terms of the niches before you find out what it is. And then, that could change in 2 years, in 12 months. And I think it's a really good way to normalize that and to let other VAs know, whether they're just starting or they're established, it's that it's okay to change and pivot and, change your niche or look at different clients or different services. It doesn't have to be that niche or that ideal client forever, and taking that pressure off and just giving yourself permission to try a few things and see what works for you. It has to work for you at the end of the day.
Yeah. If you don't enjoy it, you may as well go back to a corporate job. That's my opinion anyway. I think for me, the reason I know I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing is because I don't get the Sunday scaries anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't sit on a Sunday and freak out that I need to work on Monday. I'm actually on a Sunday sitting down and writing a list of the things I get to do on Monday. So it makes a difference just finding something that you enjoy doing. And it's okay if you don't find it straight away.
Yes, absolutely. Speaking of changes within our business, you have recently gone through a beautiful rebrand and a name change. Do you want to share a bit about that and how you came to that decision and how you sort of tackled that project in terms of your business?
My name was actually in my dreams. I dreamt it. I dreamt of my grandfather, and who has passed away. And he was always in my dreams surrounded by fireflies. So I kept thinking, what does this mean? When I looked up the meaning of firefly, it's to shine a light and enjoy the smaller things in life, in a nutshell. And that's what I want to do, be that guiding light for clients who are overwhelmed or don't know what the next steps are, and provide that guidance and support. And in turn, it allows them to free time to spend time with family, spend time going for a hike, spend time with friends, and do the things they actually enjoy. So that's how my business name came about.
That is I didn't know that. I
No.
obviously have watched on the sidelines of your beautiful rebrand and the name change and all of that. What a beautiful story. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing that. That is
thanks.
so, yeah, very special. It gave me goosebumps when you told that story about your grandfather. That's so special. And what a great way to kind of land on that name and know that it's right for you.
Yeah, and the more I delve into fireflies and what they mean, the more I just went, this is kismet. It's exactly what I want my clients to feel. And I hope that conveys through working with me, and then also my branding and socials as well.
Yeah. So in terms of working with you now, what are the types of services and support that you offer to your clients?
So currently I offer podcast launch support, podcast management, and then editing services as well. I do audits of podcasts as well. So if anyone wants a fresh perspective on their podcast, I will happily have a listen and provide my insights and analysis on it.
Okay, so when you say, if we talk about the first two kind of categories of your service offering, so the podcast launch and then the management, what does that look like for hosts of podcasts or people that might be thinking about, they've got this great idea, they want to get that message out into the world, and podcasting is the forum that they'd like to use? How does sort of working with you on a launch or an existing podcast look like, or what sort of support do you offer?
So with a launch, I offer support from strategy. So working with the client to help develop a strategy, plan episodes out, as well as setting up their hosting platforms and everything they need in the back end, because there is more than one thing to set up and people generally don't think of it. And then also things like guest management, creating promotional content, repurposing episodes into emails, blogs, all the things, but really focusing on getting that launch strategy and promotional marketing plan down pat for the clients, so that all they have to do is record and they have confidence that we have a well-laid plan ready to go. I also include workflow management through project management software. So at a glance, my clients all know where things are up to without having to panic or check what's happening. They just log in and can see clearly where everything is up to. The podcast management is essentially almost similar to the launch, except we have already launched and we're just moving forward, enjoying the fun of podcasts.
What an amazing service, because you often hear people say, oh, that would be such a great podcast idea. But then you think about, you think, oh, I just get like a microphone and, record myself and that's fine. But to do a quality podcast, a podcast series, I think there's, like you said, there's so much more that goes into it. But it's so nice that these people, business owners or just individuals that maybe have an idea, aren't stuck then behind all the logistics of making it work, so they never get their message out there to the world, and that people like you are available to go, you've got this beautiful idea, the world needs to hear this, but let me take all of that logistics and admin out of it so they can do the bit that they're really great at, which is talking on a certain topic, interviewing people. One thing I found that was really helpful when you and I started working together was I was really overwhelmed with the technology side. So both the software and the hardware, like what recording platforms do I need? What headphones do I need? What speakers? And I think that's something else that you did a really great job at, as of providing those recommendations around different price points, different software and the pros and cons based on my goals. So I think that's something like a real value add that you can provide, because then a client just has to basically follow your advice and it's a quick turnaround in terms of getting that podcast ready to launch.
Absolutely. And I completely neglected to say I do audio and video editing as part of those packages. Probably the biggest thing and the most labor intensive thing of a podcast is editing, because look, there's software that utilizes AI to quickly remove things like the ums and ahs, but I find that if you remain reliant on just that software, it takes away components where maybe that one pause is vital to the tone of a podcast episode. So look, AI can be handy in everything, but I do believe you still need that person to listen, to watch, and not just once, but I usually go over 3 times minimum to make sure everything flows nicely, sounds good, and looks good as well.
You mentioned AI there. How do you see the role of AI in the podcast management world? Are there certain areas where you think, you mentioned around the editing, and it can, taking out a certain pause could really impact how that story is conveyed, or the messaging or the tone? How do you see AI benefiting roles that you play for clients in terms of that podcast management?
I leverage it every day, to be quite honest. I am not a copywriter by trade, and so I usually throw my ideas into Chat or Claude with my notes about the podcast, and then I ask it for an outline, for example, show notes, and I then take that away and refine it. Sometimes when you want to get the point across, you overthink it with everything sometimes. So I do like to use AI as a bit of a brainstorming buddy as well.
So it's more of a kind of tool in your overall podcast editing and management toolkit as opposed to a solution.
Exactly. And automations as well definitely are key with the workflow management. Little things like that where you've got repetitive tasks and just things that take time, and over time it all adds up. AI definitely can benefit there.
If people are listening and they think, I'm sitting on this great podcast idea, or I'm doing so much of my podcast management myself and, I'm getting caught up in all of that, what's the best way for people to reach out or chat to you or find out more about those sort of services that you offer, Giulia?
Currently, the best way would be on Instagram, which is at Firefly Digital Support. My website is under construction at the moment. So Instagram is where I mainly live.
Okay.
So just send me a DM, or I have a booking link on my bio. Like Adrienne knows, I can talk podcasts any day, every day.
Yeah. And we'll make sure we link all of those ways to get in contact with you in the show notes as well. In your experience, is it people that are coming to you with the idea, or are the majority of people coming to you for support that already have a podcast and they want to free up some of that admin and podcast management time?
It's a bit of both. So I have people approaching me who have an idea but don't know where to start, or others where they have a podcast and they've just realised that it's taking way too long for them to do. And let's face it, like if you're a business owner and you're wanting to use a podcast to generate leads, the last thing you want to do is sit and edit for 2-3 hours, because that's how long of time you will need to do it properly. If I could give any advice, is delegate to someone who knows what they're doing and love doing it, so that you can do what you love and also bring in those billable hours. So if you've got a service that you could be offering to a client rather than editing, it just makes sense that you would delegate to someone else.
And that, I think, is the real crux and the real role that our industry plays, whether you're specializing in copywriting or podcast management or, diary and travel, the reason people come to us is, yes, they can probably do it all themselves, but their time in their business is better spent somewhere else, having the impact that they want, reaching the customers that they want, billing the amount of money that they need in their business. That's exactly why our industry exists, right? I think you nailed it there in terms of really summarizing what we do as an industry. Is most of the businesses that we work for, all the services that we do, they know how to do themselves. They've chosen to outsource it to free them up to spend the time in their business doing the things that only they can do in their business, to stay in their lane, the things that light them up and why they started their business in the first place, and to delegate and outsource all those other areas that may be holding them back from reaching the people that they want, having the impact that they want, making the money that they want, and the whole reason why they got started in their business. So I think this podcast management VA is a really great example of how they can get their message out there, especially if they're wanting that to generate business for their company or their business, but to free them up just to do the actual recording, the one bit they can't really outsource, or interviewing, and leaving the experts to do the rest in a really flexible and fluid and cost-effective way.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better.
You mentioned before around advice that you would have given Giulia 3 years ago when you were starting your business. If there is someone that's listening that's maybe getting started or thinking about coming into the VA and OBM industry, or they're just at one of those positions in their business where we've all been that way, think, oh, do I want to keep doing this? It's a little bit hard. Is there one piece of advice or one tip that you would give people listening that are just starting out or maybe at a little bit of a crossroads in their business that you would give them?
For someone who's starting, don't wait for it to be perfect. Just start. You've got nothing to lose. For someone who's stuck or questioning, find a community that you can lean on, because I can tell you there is no bigger cheerleader than someone in your community. I can talk from experience. I've been that person where I've almost gone, I'm just going to go get a full-time job because it's easier. And the support and the encouragement of not to give up and just keep fighting for the business and doing what I love was the push I needed to continue, because it is hard and no one's saying it isn't. I'm definitely not saying it isn't hard, but with a community, it is, dare I say it, fun when you find the right community.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Giulia, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been really lovely to get to know you even more, to hear that beautiful story you shared about how the Firefly name came to be, and to, I guess, understand more from you around the work that you do, why you do it, and the ways that you can support businesses. So thank you very much for being one of our guests on Seed to Success.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Seed to Success. Make sure you're following along so you never miss an episode. If you have friends in the VA or OBM space, feel free to share this episode if you think they may get something out of it too. A very special thank you to today's sponsor, the VA Lead Network. For more information about their amazing business, head to valeadnetwork.com.au and make sure you check out the episode description for a very special bonus from our friends at the VA Lead Network.